Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. ICAST, I'm so excited. I love this time of year. How many of you first-time ICASTers? Welcome to ICAST. This is the best 4 days that you'll find in fishing. It's absolutely phenomenal. And yes, thanks to Ridge Runner, who are sponsoring all the Lunch and Learn talks. And tomorrow, I believe at noon or 1, Ridge Runner will be hosting a panel that I will also be on, talking about some of the technological innovations going on in the industry as well. So today, I want to talk about artificial intelligence, specifically tied to our industry of recreational fishing. But I want to do a different kind of approach than what we've been talking about with AI. So last year at the Lunch and Learn, I gave a talk specifically about AI and content creation and how we're using artificial intelligence for generating content, from written content, image, video, sound, all kinds of content. And then I also talked a lot about AI and the retail sector. And as John mentioned, if you keep up with the Fishing Tackle Retailer magazine, I do a column in each issue specifically for retailers about ways to integrate AI into your business toward the end of enhancing what you're doing. But so there's the AI column in Fishing Tackle Retailer, and I also, in the new issue of Fishing Tackle Retailer, because we're talking a lot about e-commerce and what Temu is doing, there is a full feature story about how Temu works and how that's affecting what we're doing in the recreational fishing market. So if you take a look at the FTR issue that just came out. But here's the thing, that was a year ago that I was talking about content creation and talking about retail. So much has happened in the last year. This is such a rapid velocity development kind of technology, and over the last year we've seen some massive changes in AI that will have direct impact on what we're doing in this industry. Now, when I talk about rapid development, one of the things we have to start off acknowledging is that we are now seeing, depending on whose data you look at, we are now seeing anywhere from a couple of hundred to 1,000 new applications and platforms being launched every week. Now, the thing about these new applications and platforms are that this rapid pace is being driven by a lot of the big AI companies, people like OpenAI, Google, DeepMind, Anthropic, Meta. They're developing a lot of stuff, but what we're also seeing is a lot of smaller companies developing niche platforms for very specific use. So up until about a year ago, when we would talk about AI, everybody would default think toward ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, and those kinds of platforms are generic platforms. They were never designed for very specific niche kind of placements. So that's why you see all this stuff. For instance, I'm a professor at University of Florida, and in the academic world, all the conversation about AI as a cheater's tool, AI getting everything wrong. Well, none of those platforms were designed for academic writing. So now we're seeing platforms that come out that have ethics guardrails or have industry guardrails, are designed for very specific kinds of deployment. So that proliferation then of open source AI, being able to access code, particularly through sites like Hugging Face or GitHub or private, is allowing smaller companies to develop AI platforms that fit very specific needs. And the other thing that we're seeing too is, even though the title of my talk talks about AI in the recreational fishing industry, we have to acknowledge that AI is not a single thing. It's an umbrella term for a whole lot of different kinds of technologies. So we may use AI in content creation in generating alphabetic text or image text, but that's a very different kind of AI than the AI that you're going to use to track your supply chain if you're a manufacturer or a distributor. So AI means a whole lot of different things, and I'm going to try to talk about a bunch of those changes that have occurred over this year. So we're seeing this big bubble start to blow up of startups that are building out very specific, industry-specific, context-specific AIs. Now, most of these are proprietary, you do pay for them, but what makes them fantastic is they're operating on proprietary data sets, vetted data sets, so the information that they can access can either be your data or data that has already been vetted as accurate. So you're losing the problem of incorrect information or hallucination. So part of what we're seeing in this rapid development phase is that a lot of the AIs that are designed for context-specific use are more correct in what they're able to do. So a lot of what we're seeing also are updates to some of the standard platforms that are out there, like we're now on to ChatGPT 4.5, Gemini has moved into its 2.0 edition. So we're seeing some of the bigger stuff updated, but we're also seeing these really new platforms. And what that's allowing, like I said, is that now we're looking for a platform, not a platform that does everything, but a platform that does a specific task. I need video edited, so I go to a video editor. I need alphabetic text or image, or I need supply chain tracking, or I need customer optimization programs. Are all designed for those specific use cases. So here's the way to think about this. When Thomas Edison first developed that practical application of electricity and we started using electricity, the immediate follow after that wasn't developing new things to learn about electricity, it was developing new ways to use electricity, that we started seeing a long strain of how can I make things electric. So this is a lot of what we're seeing now is how do we use the AI tech that's there to do the specific things that we want done. Now, what that means for an industry like our industry is that we're watching this rapid development not only have the potential to do the kinds of things that we need specifically in the industry, but we're actually watching a transformation in what the industry does, in how we do things. Now, that can be a frightening thing in some ways because really it's a signal that stuff is changing. And a lot of us don't like change, and we like those kinds of, we've always done business this way, I don't want to not do that anymore. So things like using AI in certain sectors instead of sales reps, or using AI in content generation, or using AI to track shipping. We're seeing a lot of these changes actually unfolding in front of us. So this is why when we see an app like Temu and we're confused by how it's operating and why it's offering lower prices, we have to start looking at what is the backside AI that they're using. And so that confusion starts to get sort of demystified of what they're actually doing, because what Temu is doing in e-commerce right now is going to end up having an effect on what we do. And in fact, I think our sponsor Ridge Runner is a prime example of how these new technologies are being used in sales in our industry as well. So if you walk through the new product showcase and look at the electronics stuff and notice, and I've been walking around the booths all morning, how much now AI integration is starting to play out. I just saw a company over here, I have no idea what their name is, I'm sorry, and I'm not shilling for anybody, even if I knew the name, but they've got an AI integrated fishing reel where the control is in your handle, you've got buttons to push, and it's AI generating information about your fishing as you're fishing. We saw last year that KastKing came out with the Bluetooth that comes through the sunglasses with responding to data coming from your reel. So we're seeing these changes already unfold. So let's talk about then, with all these changes, what the real possibilities are for what's unfolding in the recreational fishing industry. And I'm going to try to cover a lot of different areas of our industry, not just the media content production, which is where a lot of the conversation comes in. I'm using AI as a way to generate content. So the first thing, and I've written about this in Fishing Tackle Retailer, is when we have a customer, for those of you in retail, or even if you have a guide, if you're a guide and you have regular customers or new customers, or if you're doing online booking, we're gathering a lot of data about our customers, purchase histories, the kinds of things when and where they're buying stuff, and we're starting to see that these advanced AI models can now take that data and rather than saying just, hey, it's spring, we've got a sale on this tackle for local fisheries in this region. Now we can specify that right down to, hey, Tony, I recognize that you're buying new fishing line every December. It's November. Here's what our fishing line sales are for the stuff you've traditionally bought. And now you can customize those kinds of advertising and marketing to a specific angler. Now, those of you, and I'm going to use this as an analog example, we've got a liquor store in town in Gainesville that when you buy wine or liquor or whatever, they log it and under your customer heading. So when I walk in the next time and I say, hey, I'm looking for a wine for Thanksgiving dinner, they go, oh, well, according to our records, for the last 2 Thanksgivings, you've liked this and you haven't liked this. We can do that in our industry as well with this hyper-customized, hyper-personalized kind of approach to the data collection that we're doing. That also gives us the opportunity to create other kinds of content that we can talk about as sort of companion content. So for instance, if I've got a customer who I know is a big walleye angler, and I have tutorials and content about walleye that can automatically be sent and emailed to that person, now I'm really targeting more of a personalized kind of, hey, you're really interested in walleye fishing, here's some stuff you should know, and by the way, we're going to now have sale on walleye gear. So having that data that we've always collected in just about any part of the industry now gives us the opportunity to hyper-personalize the kinds of conversations, the kind of sales approaches that we're having. We're also starting to see AI that uses predictive analytics that's taking data and making predictions about it. Anybody an NFL fan? One of the things that's frustrated me to death about the NFL in the last 2 years, and I'm a big football fan, but I get annoyed because coaching isn't coaching anymore. It's predictive analytics that shows that this play works 35% of the time in this situation with these personnel on the field. Well, now I go to the analytics, so I have a better chance of doing that. Well, we can see this now with all of our weather data, with previous migration data, with calendar set data, that we can start making prediction. Oh, the Buxton, North Carolina bluefish run that hit on October 13th last year, the water temperatures are 3 degrees cooler than they were during that same time period. So we're going to make the predictive analytics show us that that run will happen. And of course, it's fish, so no matter what we predict, it's never going to be right. But we can come a lot closer, particularly when we start tracking highly migratory species, or we start looking at when hatchery stuff is coming off. We can start predicting that because of the amount of data that we have. We're using AI a lot more to keep up with real-time supply chain optimization. And we all know, particularly with what happened during COVID, that unexpected events can really throw supply chain up into the air. And so if you're experiencing a delay in getting parts, and we're seeing that now also with the tariff situation as companies are trying to figure out about imports, real-time data can adjust where your supply chain is coming from. So if you're getting how many of you were at the industry breakfast this morning and saw those numbers on what percentage of equipment is actually coming in from China? What happens when that supply chain gets disrupted because of the changes in the de minimis rules or the tariff rules, or there's a military conflict somewhere? The AI now can redirect supply chain, go here to get these products. And so we're seeing a much more efficient supply chain route rather than just relying on only one way to get parts for our equipment, which of course leads to cost savings. You're not waiting for products, you can keep product on the shelf. We are, of course, as I said last year, a lot of marketing content being driven by AI right now, particularly when we start thinking about content beyond just our alphabetic content, when we start looking at video and we start looking at animation and we start looking at other forms of content that we turn out. This to me is an area that I work very closely in, both at the university and here in the industry. It allows us to do a lot of the kinds of things that we hadn't been able to do before for very low cost and very rapidly. I'll pick on my buddy Tony over here, who wanted to make a video for his company, and he sent me a couple of media files, just some pictures and some short videos of people fishing. And what did it take? 10 minutes, and I sent you 6 videos that are all professional caliber videos, because you train the production platforms to make stuff the way you want it made. And now that we're seeing these niche kind of platforms come out, you can do things like, I was messing with Tony as well too. I have one platform that I use that has something like 600 different voices. And so I could have the video come out with a woman's voice or an old man's voice or somebody with a Hispanic accent, and he had no idea that he just assumed I had all these people in the room. So there's so much new stuff we can do with content now. There are platforms that you can literally have write the script, take the script, put it in another platform. It will create a podcast based on that script. It will create audio. It will create video. And in a matter of minutes, you've got whole new content. So even when you're writing an article, you can dump that into an AI platform and generate 4 or 5 other ways to express that same media now. We're seeing a lot more focus on customer service, particularly in the retail sales area. And with some of these AI platforms, we're creating virtual assistants that can interact. And you all have seen this, right? You've heard this certainly when you call your electric company or the IRS or whomever you're calling. You get the chatbot on the phone. Chatbot creation platforms have become so inexpensive and so user-friendly that you can generate a chatbot to respond to just about anything that you need. They're going to become much more prolific in answering fundamental customer service questions rather than somebody. How many of you have gone to Bass Pro on a crowded day and there are 2 people working and you've got a question and now you're standing around for 30 minutes waiting just to get to somebody? Sorry, Johnny Morris, I didn't mean to, but now we're seeing platforms, literally kiosks in stores where you can ask questions, talk with it back and forth, online, on the phone. And so those kinds of service and support approaches to AI are rapidly growing in terms of deployment, which is also freeing up staff. Now, we do have to keep in mind in our industry in particular, when you look at the data coming out from Southwick and some of the other industry data folks, that we are still a brick and mortar focused kind of industry. I think it's less than 10% of our overall sales fall to e-commerce, but what we're seeing is a trend of being able to go online, identify the product that you want, and then people are going to brick and mortar to buy them because they want that human interaction. So part of what we have to think about with AI, and this is sort of a mantra that I use whenever I'm talking about AI, is we're thinking about this as augmentation, not automation. We're thinking about this as an avenue of enhancing some of the more mundane tasks that you have to do, because still in our industry that face-to-face is important. So we want to enhance how do we get to that. We're starting to see smart lures. We're starting to see a lot of research and development that are using AI platforms to create new kinds of lures. And I can tell you, even though I have a couple of NDAs with some companies I'm working with, we're working with AI or I'm trying to create a platform with a couple of companies that will take your R&D, your designs, and will regenerate your designs and everything in your color palette, recatalog them, make them as photorealistic as possible so that you're able to take those AI-generated images of your product and put them wherever you want them. These are developments that are coming out very fast. We're also seeing AI being used in our R&D to simulate how we're using that tackle, so that instead of going through lots of expense of putting stuff in the field, of breaking the rod 1,000 times, that we're able to simulate a lot of the testing now in AI platforms that were designed for manufacture and research and development. We're also starting to see AI being used for personalized digital experiences for anglers. So this goes beyond just recommending a product for someone. What it allows is for a person who's, say, on your e-commerce site or on your app, that they can define their sort of profile, and now you can use that to create AI logs, to make your own kind of predictions, reminders, those sorts of things. So where we're really seeing this play out, in addition to some of the apps that are out there, Fish Angler, iAngler, those kinds of things, is we're starting to see both with guides and retail sector, that people are starting to build this adjacent AI approach, so that if I have a client or a customer that I have been working with for a while, it will now provide them with other content. Hey, you were talking about buying this fluorocarbon line. Here's some instructions on tying fluorocarbon to braid where you're not going to get the slippage. These are the knots. Here's how you tie the knots. So it becomes this adjacent kind of conversation, which then encourages customer engagement, because I don't know, as a consumer, if I buy a product, I think I would like to get something that says, hey, here's a use case for how this fluorocarbon has been working really well when you're yellowtail snapper fishing out of Marathon, or something like that. Now you're getting adjacent and external information to work in that. That will also encourage customer loyalty, because they know that you're doing more than selling them a product. You're helping them better understand that engagement. We're also seeing, and I got to tell you, this one doesn't excite me as much, but we're also seeing AI being used as a reminder for equipment maintenance. This can be everything from the factory floor right down to how do you take care of your rod when you're getting salt corrosion on it, or you need to replace a guide. We're also seeing it used as reminders, and I find this very useful in the retail sector. You know, we all know, particularly tournament anglers, we all know, switch your line out once a year. How many people actually switch their line out once a year on every rod and reel that you own? You know, I've got a couple of hundred rods and reels sitting in my garage. The cost of having, but if I get a reminder that says, hey, you bought 6-pound braid in September last year, if you're going to replace it, now's the time to do that. So you can use that for reminders about maintenance, but also we're seeing integrated AI into production floors that will monitor equipment. Hey, you're getting ready to have a breakdown. A lot of our cars do this, right? Oil change time is coming, those sorts of things. We can integrate those same concepts into our industry. So we're also seeing, because we're seeing new companies forming this, we're seeing a lot of new fishing companies pop up, and this has always been the case. And so AI is really good at developing business plans, in developing feasibility analysis for what you want to do in your company. And so you can use it as kind of a collaborator that will help you solve a lot of the problems that would take a long time. You know, those of you who have a business know that when you develop your business plan, that's a very long drafting process before you get what you want to. But if you start off by collaborating with a platform, you're going to be a couple of steps ahead of the game. It's an efficiency thing. It'll help you also identify risks. What happens if I do this with my business? How do I look at what the market trends are and integrate that into what I want to do? Does it make sense to expand into ice fishing? Does it make sense for me to bring on a new distributor? All those things can be enhanced with AI analytics that's, again, analyzing the data that we have access to. All right, so this is going to be sort of the last of these things that I want to talk about in terms of just overall platform changes. One of the biggest changes that we are seeing in the evolution of AI right now is what we call agential AI, AI agents. And what AI agents are these kind of self-learning, not in an intelligence way, but evolution. They move, basically they're taking real-time data and giving you your specific information. So let me give you a quick example. Well, basically what they're doing is they're autonomously keeping up with information and then curating that information and bringing it back to you. So we see this in cybersecurity a lot, that we see a surveillance system that monitors a digital network, for instance, and when it sees an anomaly, when it sees something that looks suspicious, then without, signaling your oil change light, it would change the oil, not literally. But if it sees in your cybersecurity system an anomaly, without having to send that oil change alert or cyber alert, it solves the problem. So it becomes an agent that's doing the task for you. Now, I can tell you that there are a couple of companies in our industry that are already moving into Agential AI for working with customers, so that when you're on their web page, when you're subscribing to their service, or when you have an account, so like when you log into e-commerce and you register that, what it's doing is creating your agent, and now you're interfacing with your agent, and it allows you to have complete control over what's going on with that site. Let me give you a quick kind of example of this. So as mentioned, I work at the University of Florida, and University of Florida is the leader in AI research globally. We're rebranding right now as the AI University. And this past semester, we've been way ahead of the AI curve, primarily because Chris Malachowski, who heads up NVIDIA, is a UF alum, and he donated the fastest academic supercomputer and $70 million to UF to make UF the AI leader in AI research. So this past semester, there was a group of 12 of us who were charged by the university to ask the blue sky question, not of what are we going to do with AI next year, but what are we going to do with AI moving forward that will keep UF way ahead of the game. And the number one development question was, how do we create agential AI for every person on campus, every student, every teacher, every staff member, so that when I open up my phone and say I'm a new student, first year at UF, that not only does it give me my schedule, but it gives me routes on campus. It shows me how long it's going to take to get here, and everything's personalized to the individual user rather than that traditional web-based, web-based is now traditional web-based approach that will just give me a map that everybody can see. Everything, and then it will make recommendations. Hey, you're taking Calc 2 this year and you're majoring in engineering, you might want to register early for Calc 3 because it's a high demand class. This is how many seats we have left, and it's all geared toward that individual user. We're starting to see that more and more in this industry for that one-on-one kind of connection. And I can't name company names, but I know of at least 3 different companies right now that are developing their own agential AI specifically for that kind of interaction with their consumers. So let me give you, and I'm going to wrap this up. I know I've only been talking about 25 minutes, so I'll go to 30. We can have some question and answer. I want to give you 5 of the big overarching kind of impacts that the last year of AI development are having on this industry and will continue to have on this industry specifically. The first is where, and you've heard me talk about this, the first is we are seeing mass customization at scale. This is one of the things that we're going to be pushing for over the next couple of years. This allows, no matter what part of the industry you're in, to develop those individualized experiences, to develop individualized product recommendations, information to a specific user. We are going to see a lot more customization at large scale. So it's not that a big box retailer is just targeting bass anglers. Now they're targeting John, the bass angler, and what he does specifically. So a lot of customization we're going to see over the next couple of years. We're also going to see a lot of autonomous operational optimization, which means a lot of those complex business processes that any business has to take care of, everything from billing to shipping to marketing, we're seeing a lot more autonomy and autonomous work to get this done so that you can focus on bigger issues and bigger kinds of approaches to development. Now, with that, and I want to pause there for a second, because this gives us the opportunity to really start asking a different kind of question. A lot of folks who are starting to integrate into AI and bring AI into their business, and rightfully so, are asking the very fundamental question of how can these platforms, how can these technologies improve what I do? We need to start asking a very different question. We need to start asking the question of what can these platforms and technologies allow me to do that I never thought I could do before? what comes next? That for me is the driving question about the potential of what these technologies can do. What are some things that these platforms, these technologies allow me to do that I would have never imagined I could have done in my business context? It allows us to move forward in different ways. And like I said, there's going to at first be a lot of resistance to that. What do you mean I don't need sales reps? We always have had sales reps. How do we deal with this without that? Moving forward and how we're going to think about this is that what comes next question really has to drive our integration. So we're also going to see a lot of data-driven, proactive foresight that we're going to use a lot of AI and data gathering for analytics and predictive outcomes so that we can take those predictive and also kinds of prescriptive outcomes from all these mass data sets that we have access to in order to sort of be proactive in making our decisions ahead of the game. So we're going to do a lot of forward thinking there in terms of anticipating. How do we anticipate the impact of what our data says about hurricanes in the Florida Keys this year? How do I use that data to predict out what my hotel registration is going to look like if I'm running a fishing resort somewhere? So a lot of that forward thinking kind of proactive decision making. We're also going to see a lot more AI-driven content creation and dissemination. You are already seeing it in your daily lives that so much of the content that you're seeing is being generated by AI and being distributed by AI. Here's the interesting thing about that. This is not new. I think a lot of the talks that I give, I think I said this last year, most of our news outlets that we watch and we get our news from have been using content creation, AI generation for close to 15 years now. The example I always give is that the LA Times, when there's an earthquake, they have an AI called QuakeBot that is tied into the USGS data hub, and if there's an earthquake, it instantly takes all the information, writes an article, and it goes straight to publication with the LA Times. Now, for years, they never told us that it was AI generated. We just got up, if you're living in LA, you read the newspaper, there was an earthquake, and everybody was cool with it. We're seeing more and more of that. ESPN, Reuters, Bloomberg, pick a news agency. I think that ESPN was at 52% of their content is generated by AI, that there's just massive amounts of AI content. Now, here's the wacky thing about that. We all sort of bristle about, oh, AI-generated content. There was a survey done last month. People prefer reading AI-generated content until they find out it's AI. Because the AI is so much more specific in the details it generates, and it plays into the formulas of what readers want, we actually prefer to read the AI written text until somebody says the robot wrote this, and now we bristle at it. So we're seeing a lot more content generated that way. I was working with a company, again, I'm not going to mention who, that we looked at a platform for content generation specifically just for the new products that they were releasing this year. And usually it took their marketing people between 3 and 4 months to produce the content specifically for that new product set. One day they had it all done. They spent a couple of days going through making sure everything was accurate, but it reduced their production time by close to 2 months for those new products. We are going to see much more of this. We're also going to see a rapid increase in the velocity of how we're creating new ideas and how we're developing those new ideas into products and services. This cuts down on a lot of our process of, well, this looks like a good idea, what if we try this? Through simulation, through prototyping, all of that is speeding up. It's going much faster from concept to getting product on shelf, or from concept to getting your services out there, your media out there. Our content producers are ramping up how fast it takes to make their videos. How fast does it take to generate their podcast? So we're going to see a lot more of that acceleration in how we're moving from ideation to development cycles. So That's what's happened in the last year. That's where we're moving. And I got to tell you, and I'm going to give this as an example. I wanted to bring two people up on stage to do this, but I'm just going to tell you about it because there was a fire code risk in that. And I saw, there's it's very simple, practical kind of exercise. So if, Audra, I handed you 2 sticks and said, make a fire for me, and I handed Tony a lighter and said, make a fire for me, which one would you prefer to make the fire? I mean, you could make a fire with 2 sticks. I did it in Cub Scouts. But if you got the lighter, why? I mean, yeah, you might want that skill if you're doing survival stuff, but the efficiency of the tools give us the opportunity to do these things in ways that now I don't have to spend an hour and a half getting mad scraping sticks together when I can, as they told us in the 70s, flick your bic. So this kind of efficiency is going to drive the velocity at which your competitors are doing things, getting stuff out faster, getting more content out there and that. So I'm going to be quiet for now. Let's open it up for Q&A. John's got a microphone, but that's where we are and that's where we're moving with AI. And by the way, yes, my own sort of shilling for myself, Flying Fish AI is doing strategy and consulting work across the industry. Everything from content right down to supply chain, robotics, all of it. So yeah.
So the question I have is, I'm a charter captain in Islamorada, and I'm wanting to expand my business by creating educational videos for people online. So I saw you talking about there's all sorts of different platforms that can do these AI generated scripts for you. Out of your personal experience, which should I lean closer towards?
All right, so I'm gonna give you an answer. But before I give you the answer, I want to make clear to everybody that any platform I mention is not an endorsement, okay? It's a recommendation. I don't work for any of these companies, and I don't want, there's a platform called Descript, Descript. Start there.
Awesome, thank you.
And depending on what you're trying to do, look at Natural Speak, look at Notebook LM, and then depending on what you're trying to do with video creation, and so these are all proprietary. I mean, you're not, the free stuff like Gemini and stuff like that is not going to do what you want, right? You got to understand that with the free stuff, the basic rule is garbage in, garbage out. So you want to look for the proprietary platforms that are designed to do exactly what you want them to do. I always recommend Adobe Firefly, which is their AI content generation. It's expensive, but the cool thing about Firefly is it's only using what Adobe has created or licensed, so you're not going to get wacky stuff off the internet. It's going to be exactly where you guide it, but it is cost prohibitive.
Absolutely. And then what was the I messed it up when I was writing it out, but the name of to write a script.
Descript. Descript. And I'm going to pick up on that comment of I messed it up when I was writing down. You see this? Anybody use Claude? Claude, I don't have it on for legal reasons right now. There are 2 versions. One you can wear on your wrist, the necklace, or a pen, and then there's one that clips to your phone. If I tap this, it would have recorded everything I said, recorded everything you said, dump it into an automatic AI platform. It would give me a transcript. It would give me key action items. It would give me summary. And basically, when you're in a sales meeting, if you have I use this in meetings all the time. I just tap my wrist, and anybody who's used AI Companion on Zoom, where afterwards you can ask, what were the key takeaways from this meeting? You can do this in any conversation now. The Claude platforms are fantastic. And if you got it on a phone, you can have it on your phone while you're having a phone meeting. You can do it on your Zoom meetings, and it will then answer all the questions. What was it that Audra said about the new paddle tail, this, that, or the other? And it will just tell you right away, this is what she said. So you don't want to write it down? Plot it. Other questions? Yep. He's asking which video editing platform. It depends on what. Well, Natural Speaking does voice, so it depends on what you're trying to do with video editing. Are you trying to create new video just from written? Descript will do that.
Oh, okay.
And then there are a couple others that are animated based, where and Adobe Firefly does this, where it's text to video. I want a picture. I want a short video of a walleye coming in through an ice hole, and it will generate a video. The real trick with all of these of course, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase prompt engineering. You as a user, it's not a magic box. It's not a genie. You've got to learn how to use the platform and really tease out to ask it to give you what you want. But yeah, I would look at Firefly, and Descript does a lot of that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
All good. Anybody else?
John, right up here. Our next act is going to get John to run laps, so I want you to ask a question, then I want you to.
So I'm backing on what these guys are asking. What if I wanted to create vector graphics using AI?
I'm going to give you the easy answer. Photoshop. Yeah, Photoshop has well, they don't call it Sensei anymore, but they've got an AI. It's called, it's generative something, but it'll, as far as I know, yeah. And you may have to, you may have to move it, I don't remember, but you may have to move it into something like After Effects or one of the other, but they're all now integrated through the AI. And the other part, I'll get you in 1 second, the other part of this, and I'm sorry in answering this, like I said, there are literally about 1,000 new platforms a week coming out. It is impossible to keep up with what they are. There's some great services though. There's an AI for that, is a listserv that you can get on, and you can tell it, I just want to know about stuff coming out for graphics. And so there are ways to keep up. So when you're asking me these questions, I'm tunnel visioned in terms of these are the platforms I use to do these tasks. And I don't do all the possible tasks.
So for like ChatGPT on like, if you're paying for the premium, you're getting the 4.0 or the 4.5, is it possible to train the language model to be a more useful tool in these applications, or is it better to just go searching for a different AI in
Well,
general?
it really depends on what you mean by more useful. So there are some limitations in the OpenAI and the ChatGPT platform. So for instance, even we just tested this last night at the bar, which is where you should test all AI. But OpenAI does not have access to anything newer than 2 years ago. I'm going to give you an example of this to show you real quick. So in April, I did a congressional testimony about AI, and one of the senators asked the question about why is AI so biased toward the liberals. I asked ChatGPT who the president of the United States was, and it said Joe Biden. This is clearly, and we had to point out, Biden was president less than 2 years ago, and so the Trump election hadn't occurred in the data set that ChatGPT has access to. So even when you're using the paid-for Enterprise Edition, you're still limited in data sets, which is why having a proprietary data set that you control. So if you have a platform that, and you can do this with OpenAI 4.5, where it's just your data. Yeah, you wanted to comment on this. Hold on, I'm going to have to get John. I'm sorry, did that get to what you were getting at? Yeah, but yes, you can train it. So like when I use Gemini, I will literally say, do you remember that conversation we had 2 months ago about TPE plastics? And it will say, yes, do you want me to return to that? So the more stuff you put into it, the more you can use that. And you can use it to say, here's how I write a catalog copy. Make a new catalog copy, but write it like I would write it. But you got to train it. Yeah.
Where do you go to find out about these phishing AI platforms?
So it depends on what you're asking. If you're asking about platforms that we can use in the industry, or are you asking about platforms that are out there that are using AI for what we do?
I'm a creator of a product, and I'm trying to do.
Okay, so there is no platform that is just content creation in the industry. But there are endless, and I'm not exaggerating, content creation platforms out there. So I'm going to make a couple of recommendations. One is there's something called There's an AI for that. That's a good place to look. CNET is a good, but to be honest about it, particularly because now that Gemini is integrated into your Google search, and this is why standard web searches are changing, and I'm sure you've already seen this, that when you Google something, it's giving you an AI output. Google it, and you'll get the AI response. Now, you got to be careful, though, particularly with those kinds of searches, because the way their algorithm works is they're bringing sponsored information up first, and then it will go to the general stuff. My recommendation in any kind of web search that you do for anything, get below the fold. Bring up the stuff from the bottom, get past all the sponsored stuff, and start looking. It'll repeat some of the same stuff, but now you're into the stuff that they're just finding rather than what's being paid for. Okay, we got time for one more question. Got one right over here.
So, with the current velocity being so high and adoption and platforms and everything else like that, what are you seeing from, or what do you predict, no pun intended, kind of, next 36 to 60 months from compliance security from within the internal network perimeter?
Okay, that is a fantastic question, and I'm going to try to be really brief in answering that. He's asking about compliance. And so when Trump was elected, 2 days, 48 hours after he was elected, he rescinded Biden's executive order on AI research and development, safety, and precautions, right? So what the federal government was attempting to do was to deregulate AI development. Now, what it did was it pushed those regulation decisions to the state level. As of last week, nationwide, individual states, we have over 408 pieces of legislation up regarding AI compliance and AI security. The first big problem is that about a month and a half ago, Trump also created an executive order that said states can't make determinations about AI development. So right now we're in a chaotic mode. The bigger problem with that is this issue of compliance. If we are leaving it up to the individual decision maker, so I see you've got a Fishbrain hat on, so if Fishbrain is making certain decisions about ethics and research in their AI, and over here another company is doing something else, and they're using a different set of compliance regulations, if there was, say, a need for those companies to collaborate, you're never going to have alignment. Where this becomes the biggest problem is that if we have free, deregulated AI development in this country, how are we going to align with France that has very strict regulation, or with anybody in the EU who has an entirely different set of AI compliance regulations? So predict it, forget it. The laws are changing day by day. Most of those 408 pieces of legislation are geared toward consumer protection. They're geared toward not using AI to do things that could potentially harm, and I don't necessarily mean physical, but also financial harm to the consumer. We're starting to see more conversation at the development end too. So that my prediction is, until we get some kind of stability in terms of how federal regulation, and that's the standard argument. Should there be federal regulation of fill in the blank, or should this be state level? So there's no way to predict it, but it's a big conversation right now. Thank you all very much. I am a high-paid consultant, would love to come get money from you to talk about AI further. I would recommend checking out the Ridge Runner panel tomorrow. It won't all be about AI, but it will be talking about some of the stuff they're doing. And those of you who are new to ICAST, again, welcome. This is the greatest 4 or 5 days. I hope you have a great show, and I'm more than welcome to talk with any of you, but they got to get set up for the next speaker because he's back there, and he's phenomenal, and you want to stick around for his talk too. So.